I want to work with about 10 nurses to do this in 30 days. So it's a challenge. If you're interested in that, reach out to me.
Today on Time We Discuss, I have Tina Baxter with me. Tina, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to speak with you. You are a nurse entrepreneur. I can only generally get a very vague idea of what that could be. What's a day typically like for you? And then maybe we'll backtrack as to how you got there.
So a typical day, which is in nursing, there's never really a typical day. But let's just start. So on my clinic days, I'm usually up in the morning. I have a morning prayer call. Grab my lunch and my breakfast out of my refrigerator, and I'm heading out the door. And driving to the office, and I'm seeing patients. And so I typically see about 20 to 25 patients a day. So I work 10-hour days in the clinic, and it can be very hectic. But on the days where I'm not in the clinic, those are the days where I'm in my own business. And so it varies. Like this morning, I had an appointment at 9 o'clock with an attorney that I talked to. But on another day, I had a call at 7:30 in the morning from someone in Australia. So you just don't know, right? And that's the beauty of being in nursing and being an entrepreneur. Your days are full of adventure, and there's really not a typical day to really look at.
So I know with other professionals, you have different licensure that goes along with your profession, and it might be I believe they're typically limited at the state level. How does that work when you're working in a nursing capacity with someone outside of your state or outside the country?
Well, it really depends on what you're doing. And so, because of what I do, is I help nurses build their own businesses. That's what I do. I help them become entrepreneurs. I can have a conversation with anyone in the world. And what I teach is basic business principles, how to get started in what you want, because I'm the startup person. I really like to get, into the weeds with them to get their business launched. And so we talk about your mindset, we talk about your health, we talk about spirituality and what you're doing, and connection to other people. So we run the full gamut. We're very holistic when we talk about coaching and consulting on your business. And so that can be done anywhere in the world as long as you got Zoom, right? And so I talk to people and I get to know them. And then I also have my own show. I have a podcast show. And so I invite nurses on to tell who are entrepreneurs and tell their story. And so if you're a nurse entrepreneur somewhere, anywhere in the world, and I hear about you, I want to hear your story. And so that's what we talk.
What led you from being a nurse to where you are now? How did that all unfold?
Well, I started out being an accidental entrepreneur. I started out as a nursing student. I needed to make extra cash. College students are always broke. So we needed to make extra cash. And so I decided to teach CPR classes on the side. And that's what I did. I started teaching CPR. And I even had corporate contracts, didn't even know what they were, but I had people calling me from different doctors' offices saying, "Hey, can you come teach our staff?" And so I would do that. I borrowed the equipment from the hospital, and I would go teach CPR classes to make extra cash. And it never occurred to me that it would become a business. So fast forward to having gone to graduate school and becoming a nurse practitioner and all the things that we do. Um, I found myself in between jobs at one point, and a couple friends of mine said, "Hey, we're starting this business teaching CNA classes." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, they asked me to come along board." And so I did, and I became a CNA instructor. And all the time I was still teaching CPR. I never gave it up. I just kept doing it. And that's when I really got introduced into what being an entrepreneur is like. To really focus on your business and to grow something from the ground up. And I just, it was something that just took a hold of me and I never let it go. And so I love that process of starting a business. I like that the whole working from concept to every policy that you need in place. That excites me. And for a lot of people, that what terrifies them. But I help you get over that hump.
That's awesome. I actually completely relate to you. When I was in college, I also was a CPR instructor. And it was some pretty good money for being a college student. And it was
Hmm.
really neat hearing the stories that people had to tell you. Because invariably you're in a class and someone's saying, this time this thing happened and I had to do this. And the stories are
Yes.
just amazing, amazing. So let's talk about forming your business. What was that process like? Did you go through like LegalZoom? Did you work directly with professionals or like directly with an accountant, attorney? What was that like for you?
So I worked at the hospital, and at the time, the hospital had a program called prepaid legal at that time, and then you got it as employee benefit. So when I left the hospital, I didn't take the benefit with me. I could have, but I didn't know what I had. But years later, when we started that CNA business, we found out that we were $10,000 in bad debt. So we were calling the students, and it didn't work out for us very well. So we had purchased this small business membership for our business for legal services and forgotten we had it. And I said, well, maybe we should call them because they said they could help us with it. And so they did. And that was really helpful. So I worked with Legal Shield, and they still, to this day, I still have a small business plan. They help me in all my legal things that I need. I'll send a contract up there. I just did that this morning. I sent a contract for an affiliate program to the attorney, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I gotta send it over to New Jersey because the contract's out of New Jersey." So I let the New Jersey attorney look at it. So you just never know, right? When you're reading these contracts, if you don't pay attention to the fine print, you don't know where the contract originated, and that could be different from state to state. So I say that to say I have them, and I talked to my local insurance agent at the time. And I said, we need an accountant. Do you know anybody? You're a business person. Do you know somebody? And she happened to refer me to a wonderful accounting firm. We've been with them for years, and they've been so helpful and getting our business taxes done, our personal taxes, finding the deductions that we never knew we could have. I mean, all those different things that you need to do. So I always encourage my clients, find somebody that you trust, talk to them, and expand your network and find those local people. What I like is my accountant is local. I can go right to their office. If I want to go talk to the attorney, I can go right downtown Indianapolis and talk to the attorney. But they're good about calling me back, so I don't have to drive there. So I like that. So I have that team of people around me, and then I network and meet people. And so this is how I've met people from all over the United States. People that do variety of different things. And so virtual assistants, if you need help with that, I got a whole bevy of people you can choose from, right? So it's great to make those connections. And I would say, as you start up, you can start small. There are platforms out there like LegalZoom and things like that. They're out there, but I like that personal touch. And if you want that personal touch, this is where I like to go.
Invariably this is going to be different for different people, different industries. For you, what paid back dividends in terms of networking?
For me, as a very introverted person, it was a big effort. I've learned how to develop the skills to be more extroverted. I decided to go to some meetup groups. I went online, I found some meetup groups. I found one in particular that was for women. And I said, I'm going to go do that. And I went to that meeting and I said, okay, we're going to sit here. We're going to talk to three people, have breakfast with them, and then we're going to find out what they do. That's all you have to do. And then once you're done with that, you can leave. I gave myself permission to leave. And so I would choose networking events. I would find three people that I wanted to talk to, ask them what they did. And then once I found out what they did, we exchanged our cards or whatever, then I would walk away. So that gave me permission as an escape. And I started doing that more and more and kept going to the same meetings that I found comfortable and getting to know the people. So then I learned the power of following up and making that phone call, making a lunch date, having a Zoom meeting, even before Zoom was really a big thing. So when that was going on, a lot of people wanted to meet in person. No one wanted to hop on a Zoom call. No one, and I found that frustrating because for me, my schedule's packed with patients and things like that. So I don't have a lot of time to drive somewhere to meet people. So then the pandemic hits. And suddenly I'm getting these phone calls from people that I had been networking with that were more in-person type people, and didn't feel comfortable behind the screen, asking me, well, how do you make connections online, and how do you meet these people? Because I was doing it through social media. And so I said, well, this is what I do, and this is how I have these connections. And so these great companies came along, and started hosting these events or these places, platforms for people to meet each other. So you have places like LinkedIn. Alignable is very great for small business. If you want to meet a business in your area, that's a wonderful platform. Um, I was on a lunch club at one time. Um, I was doing blitzers. I mean, I just was meeting people everywhere, because then I said, once the pandemic happened, everybody was online and people were more interested in having conversations online. And so I had so many Zoom meetings and Skypes and Microsoft Teams. I mean, I was learning all these new platforms to meet people, and it opened up the entire world to me, because I found myself in a meeting with a gentleman who's the CEO of this company, based out of Boston, with offices in Greece and other places, and he happened to be stuck in Greece during the pandemic, and so we were talking about his business and what he's done with cancer research and all this kind of stuff. I never would have had that conversation with this gentleman if it hadn't been for people now on social media and talking more comfortable talking in Zoom meetings and things like that. So, in one aspect, it was horrible what happened with the pandemic, but in another aspect, I think it also made the world smaller and brought us closer together in some ways.
I completely agree with that. It's very interesting how that whole dynamic shifted with personal relationships and communicating with people and communicating with strangers and how that really affected everyone. Really, very interesting time. I'm curious, going back to you talked about the meetups. You talked about you would go in, you would have to talk to three people, find out what their occupation was, and then you're okay to leave after that. What made you come up with those parameters? Did you talk with someone? They suggested that? It was just you said, you know what, Tina, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make it happen, and then that'll be that. How did that unfold for you?
Before I started my business, I read several books on consulting and building business. I did the whole thing. I did my research, right? I'm a big researcher, so I do a lot of research. I teach people to do their market research and how to do it and things like that. And so I researched the niche I was going into. So I had read in a book about introverts and what and how to network and how to talk to people, because I'm a book nerd, right? I just read all the time. So I'm one of those people that I'm happiest in a book, right? In my corner. And so I learned how to do that. So um, because I gave myself an out, I think they made a suggestion of like just talking to like, one or two people or something like that. And I said, well, I'm going to make it three because, it's had something to do with numbers. Um, and so I was like, it has to be three for me. And I said, and if as long as I find out what they do, obviously they're going to ask me a little bit about myself. And I hadn't at that time perfected the elevator pitch, right? And all that kind of stuff. But I generally decided, I said, if I want to learn and meet people, I have to ask them about themselves. And so it stuck with me that people are happy to talk about themselves. So all you have to do is just stand there and listen. And I'm like, I can do that. And the first few times I did it, I was so nervous to even go up to say hello to people. It was really hard to break out of my shell. But I kept thinking, it's like, now how did you make friends when you were a child, when you were in kindergarten? You would just go up and say, hi, my name is. And so that's what I did. And it worked.
See, I love that. I love it because it's funny. As adults, I think, especially for me, I'm very much an introvert, and I can relate to that. It's hard as an adult to make friends. It's hard to go up
Hmm.
and say, "Hi, my name is Dan. You want to be friends?" It's not, you wouldn't say
Yeah,
that, but you know what I mean. It's
right. Hmm.
it's very difficult to do that. Tina, let me ask you this. Let's go back to nursing for a second.
Sure.
So you said you're a nurse practitioner as well, right?
Hmm. Yes.
What's that like in a typical day? How does that differ from being like an RN or another type of nurse?
Well, it varies. It really varies on your setting. So my specialty happens to be psychiatry. I'm working my gerontology and psychiatry. So I have a subspecialty in geropsychiatry. And so I'm working outpatient now. Now I used to work primary care in the nursing home, and I did geropsych in the nursing home. And so I would go see them there. What's nice for me being outpatient is they come to me and I can stay in my office. As a person who's on the road for probably about 10 years, and working in hospice and places like that, I would travel all across the state. And so it's nice to be centralized in one location. What's difference between being a registered nurse and an advanced practice registered nurse is that now I have more access, more education. I'm able to write prescriptions. I'm able to develop the plan of care, write the orders for the nurses to implement, and their plan of care. But what's great is I can bring that nursing into that arena as well. So when I see my patients, I don't just look at them as their diagnosis. And a lot of times, we typically do sometimes in medicine where you've got somebody who has COPD for instance, and you're the pulmonologist, you're going to focus on their COPD, right? And that's what you should do. You're the specialist. But for me, because I come from that nursing background, I'm going to look at their COPD. I'm going to look at their psych meds. I'm going to look at their, all the other cardiology, all the other aspects and say, okay, now how does this inform what we're supposed to do for you holistically? So it's a little bit different mindset. So I can't leave that primary care alone, even though I'm in psychiatry. I'm going to still look at all their other meds, all the other disease processes, and see if there's something that informs what's happening with you with your mental health. So, for instance, I've got a couple of clients that happen to have cancer right now. Well, I'm working with their oncologist to say, how can we support them mentally as they go through this journey with their battle with cancer? So those are some of the things that are a little bit different in what I do.
Okay. Hanging on the specialties for a second. So I know if someone wants to be a doctor, they go to med school, maybe they
Mm-hmm.
want to be a surgeon, maybe they want to be a plastic surgeon or something like that. And you have like additional specific education that goes along with that. As a nurse practitioner that specializes in psychiatric medicine, I'll say, is that through additional education, or is that just more of like you've chosen to work there in that field and you can easily transition to another field as a nurse practitioner?
It's a special education. So I was a psychiatric nurse as a registered nurse. So I worked in psychiatry most of my nursing career. And then I got my master's in nursing education, my postmaster's as a gerontological nurse practitioner, working with older adults. And so I worked on the primary care side, and I took additional classes for geropsychiatry. Unfortunately, as of right now, there is no board specialty certification for geropsychiatry for nurses. Um, but I'm hoping that we'll get that soon. And I've been after our our national organization, GAPNA, to work on that. And they said, well, why don't you write the course, the certificate course? And I'm like, okay. But I really would like to have one for geropsychiatry because it is such a niche area that I think that nurses really need that extra training there.
How difficult is it to change from one specialty to another? So let's say you wanted to, assuming this exists, you wanted to be like a pediatric nurse practitioner. Is it you take a few classes? What does that typically look like? Do you know?
If it depends on your preparation. So, for example, if you wanted to strictly do pediatric NP, you can, but that will kind of put you into that shoebox. So that's all you can see is that population. So you get adults, you're not supposed to see past a certain age. Now, if you're a family nurse practitioner, you can see all ages. So from birth to death is basically what they like to say. So it depends on what area you really want to focus on. You could be a psych nurse practitioner where you're focusing on the mental health. And again, you can see all age ranges, but your specialty is in psychiatry and mental health, not necessarily in primary care and other things. So that would depend. If you wanted to go on and add a different specialty, you would take additional training in that area. So, for example, I am a primary care provider, not an acute care provider. So if I wanted to go work in the hospital, then I probably would take additional courses and training to be an acute care provider in the hospital. So it really depends on what you want to do. Now, as a staff nurse, as a art registered nurse, you would then go and choose your training where you want to. So let's say I started out in med surge, which typically where a lot of people start out. You start a medical surge area, and I wanted to go into psychiatry. Then I can go work there, but I would have to take training. They would train me on the job in that area. It's a little bit different when you become an advanced practice nurse. You have to actually do the training program.
Okay, okay.
Mhm.
So it sounds like no matter which avenue you explore, you aren't necessarily pigeonholed in. You might have to take additional training, but you can add on different specialties or kind of switch areas.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Physicians can do that too with additional training. If they wanted to get additional residency or post residency training, you can do that. It's a little bit harder for them, but yeah, you can do that.
Tina, another thing I like to do, I like to, when I'm speaking with my guests, I like to give them the opportunity to talk about a particular project they're working on, a cause they believe in, a business that they have. So I'd like to extend that courtesy. If there's something you'd like to discuss, the floor is yours.
One of the things that I'm really working on is getting nurses to fall back in love with their profession. So I am doing a cohort, a program where if you're really interested in getting started in your business, or you need to revamp something in your business, or you got a project, I want to work with about 10 nurses to do this in 30 days. So it's a challenge, right? And so if you're interested in that, reach out to me because I really want to work with people that are committed, really focused, and are going to put the time in. This isn't for somebody that's going to be like, well, I'll start it later. Nope, this isn't the program for you. These are for fast action takers and fast starters. And if you want to really ramp up your 2024 and make this next quarter great, jump into that program.
That sounds fantastic. I'll make sure to get the links from you. I'll put them in the show notes so people can easily access those. And I'm assuming anyone in the world can do this. This will be done virtually, I assume.
Yes, it can be done virtually.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll get all the information like it'll go in the show notes, and then people can find that when they're looking for it. Tina, it's been absolutely awesome speaking with you and learning about what it's like to be not only a nurse, but an entrepreneur as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for popping in the studio. My name is Dan, and this is Time We Discuss. I really enjoyed speaking with Tina today, and I hope you enjoyed the time too. Make sure you check the links in the description to learn more. If there's a profession that you want me to cover, add a comment, and I'll find that person for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That'll do it. See you next time on Time We Discuss.